one of the special places here in Elkhart County, and I have with me my friend, and you are getting ready for retirement.
I am, after a long haul through the decades. Yes.
That's incredible. Okay, Brian, so you have been here as long as I am old.
That's true. Gee, that really puts it in perspective.
Hey, I'm young, so you're young at heart too, right?
Yes.
You've been here a while, and this museum has really just grown so much over that time.
Yes.
Let's take it back to that time when you first started here.
Right.
You know, what was it like to be a part of that?
Well, it was sort of unreal because I was right out of college and arrived in Elkhart, which was totally a different culture than what I grew up in southern Indiana.
Okay.
But I had this aspiration of moving eventually to Chicago, and I felt like I'd been there a couple times, and seemed like I could survive there. But entering the third Elkhart Juried Regional as an artist, young artist, age 23, I won Best of Show, and
amazing.
It would be about 5 weeks later that the late Jane Burns, one of my mentors, and the late Dr. Richard Burns called me in for an interview to replace two curators who were leaving to take other positions in other locations.
Okay, how old is the museum here?
The museum has recently celebrated its 46th anniversary.
Okay, so it was fairly new back then.
Yes,
Yeah.
I was here, really it was about 2.5 years into its lifespan.
Okay,
So
okay.
I wasn't at the very beginning, but pretty
But
close.
it kind of feels like it at this point, right? And you have seen so many art come through these walls, right?
Yes.
So let's talk about your art in particular. You
Sure.
are more of a mixed media artist yourself?
Yes, and I pursued that career for, at least 15, 16 years, simultaneously and outside of the realm of learning the profession of curatorship here and what that meant in every professional sense of the word. And so, during that time, I entered a lot of competitions.
Okay.
So that, the two wouldn't really be seen as one influencing the other.
Sure.
Although, making art certainly influences your ideas as a curator because I think you have a better, perhaps, understanding of what the creative impulse
Absolutely.
is and the materials that are used.
And appreciation for it.
And a little bit, a different type of appreciation. I was an art history minor, so I was well read in modernism. However, American art was in its the scholarship of American art was still in its infancy. So what's wonderful about this museum is that the scholarship has risen exponentially.
Sure.
When I arrived, there were 2 books on American art history on the shelf.
Oh, wow.
And today there would be thousands of books.
Absolutely.
And so, learning my career, 15 years into it, I decided, I'm going to set the making art aside. I'm going to get a master's, and I'm going to concentrate on my curatorship.
So now that you're going to be retiring, what does that mean for you?
Well,
you going to go back to that?
That'll be one of the things that I'll do.
That for you.
But I'm not pursuing it so much as a career move,
Okay, more for enjoyment.
Today there are more artists in the world than ever before. Maybe 80,000 to 90,000 people graduate with fine art degrees every year. And there's really, I always used to say there's less than 1%, certainly teaching jobs available at the college level if you have that MFA. But maybe 10% find their way into some art-related profession or job. And that's what my mentor, the late Jonas Howard, who was a professor at IU Southeast in New Albany, told me. He said, there's a lot of jobs in the art world that are related, and he said, maybe you could find an entry-level position in a small museum as a preparator.
And it worked out for you.
It just kind of worked out that way, So.
What advice do you have to someone who might be considering going into a career in the arts, and more specifically into kind of the curator role?
Yes, well, there are more opportunities to be an intern in a position in a museum, perhaps. Depends on where you live.
Okay.
But
is it when you're thinking art? I know we have incredible art here, especially in Elkhart County. When you're thinking a career, should we be exploring
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, we should have more. If you're a student, whether in the high school level, when I was in the 7th grade, I decided I was going to be an architect and go to Ball State, wherever that was. And, but, that changed. But wherever you are, you could investigate your local art galleries, whether they're commercial or not-for-profit, local museums. If it's visual art, if it's dance or any of the other arts, theater, then, get involved wherever you can.
Absolutely.
And so internships in some colleges will, you can go abroad to study too.
Which is phenomenal too.
So.
And I'm sure you have so much experience meeting so many artists over the years.
Yes.
What have been some of your standout pieces that you might have run into, or artists?
Oh gosh, I did do a kind of a list because I got curious about how many world famous artists I have met in my career.
Okay.
And there's at least an artist and art critics. I met the late Robert Hughes, who was Time Magazine art critic in Milwaukee. At the same time, I met the late Philip Pearlstein. And both were very gracious to me, and I was only about 24 years old then.
You were brand new.
And over the years, I met Louise Nevelson. I met, there's been so many that it's hard to recant. I'd have to look at my notes.
But
now
they
I
make
refer
an
to notes.
impression on you.
Oh, yes.
And how does that play into your role here?
Well, some of the artists I met were artists that the museum had begun to collect. And over the years, when I started, there were 224 works in the permanent collection.
Okay.
Today, there's close to 6,800 works.
Oh my gosh.
And so
I have to say congratulations for that.
Thanks. Well, it's the deep well that we go to generate thematic shows. And when I would receive something from a collector or from a living artist, I would just relish the fact that it was a gift. So we didn't buy art. It had to be donated. And now we have 3 curators working on the collection.
Amazing.
And one of them, has informed me that there is indeed over 500 sources who have donated art over the last 46 years.
I mean, that's just incredible here, especially for the
and
community.
I met almost every one of them.
At some point. So when is your last day here?
Well, my last day will be December 30th or 31st, depending.
And you'll still be a part of the museum family in some way or form?
Well, I hope so. They won't just shut the door on me. Although, they wanted me to stay longer. But I think sometimes it's important to step aside and let the next generation step up. And my co-director or executive director now, Jennifer Abrams, has done an outstanding job of advancing the mission of the museum. So I feel like my legacy is pretty secure for the next 50 to 100 years.
I love that. I love that for you too. And I know we have some beautiful work behind us too. And you grew up in southern Indiana.
I did.
And this is kind of the northern Indiana landscapes?
Well, a little bit of all.
Okay.
So behind we have, Frank Dudley, whose paintings endorsed the Robert Lieber, the first superintendent of the state parks, to become the legislature to set aside the Indiana Dunes. We have a T.C. Steele painting here. And of course, he moved to Brown County in 1907. And a few years afterward, by 1917, Adolph Schultz had moved there and established what is now famous as the Brown County Art Colony. And there's still a lot of artists in Brown County. William Forsythe was the dean of the Irvington painters. Now Irvington has been swallowed up by Indianapolis, so.
I mean, there is so much that you know. I hope you're passing on this information and have taken some time, because really as a curator, you know all the ins and outs of these artists and their pieces.
I do know a story about every work of art and everyone that gave it, and if I have kept notes, and my young colleague Randall Roberts, who has assumed that role as curator, has been here 10 years, and he's a very good, quick study, and he's absorbed a lot of those stories and can find his way. So.
Well, your legend lives on.
I hope. I met him when he was 16 years old.
Oh my gosh! Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you for 44 tremendous years.
Thank
and
you
growing
so
the
much.
museum
It's
here.
so nice to have you here today.
Absolutely. Thank you.